We asked a number of leaders, what trends and risks concern you the most these days? What progress is being made to adopt responsible practices and protect consumers?
It's very clear that digitization is both necessary, inevitable, and the question is being very clear-eyed about the ways in which access to financial products and services is going to change with that underlying technology. So it's about the tool not being good or bad, but about what's our application of that tool.
Today, there's a realization that structurally, but also due to the recent crises, be it the pandemic, be it climate, more recently the consequences of Ukraine on inflation, on purchasing power parity, attention needs to be paid, needs to significantly be paid to the mature world where vulnerable populations are growing. The income pyramid is becoming very thin in the middle. So this is really an area, mature markets, where we need to grow and intensify the debate as to how to better protect and further include populations that aren't as excluded as in the emerging world, because they do have insurance, but it's often ill-covered or ill-designed insurance or underserved populations that we need to address today.
As technology continues to shape financial services, there are new consumer risks that need to be considered.
The consumer risk that I'm most concerned about is the increase in fraud in digital financial services. As more and more people are bringing their financial lives onto apps, onto internet services, onto social media, we're seeing an increase and a sophistication of fraud attempts to get at their accounts.
Our research at SIGAP shows that the relatively newer risks relate to fraud and data misuse. The 5 relatively newer risks are synthetic identity fraud, mobile application fraud, authorized push payment scams, biometric identity fraud, and artificial intelligence-related risks like algorithmic bias. SIGAP's global research also shows that most risks are growing fast and not slowing down.
And as more services are digitized, there is increasing concern around how data is collected and used.
Research shows that low-income families value privacy a great deal. Certainly one risk is that there is a proliferation of providers, business models, and some of that is par for the course. But there is this approach of let's just take in all the data we possibly can about the customer and figure out later really what makes sense, what's relevant or not.
A major risk I'm seeing in China is related to data, such as data privacy, security, and the use of alternative data for lending decision. Alternative data have been widely used in China to support credit decision, but it's not transparent in terms of how those data is sourced and used, and if data being collected is accurate, reliable or not, and what kind of data can really be used to predict credibility. I have seen financial institutions use the private information such as gender, geography, locations, and ethnic group in the credit scoring, which could lead to algorithm discrimination.
It's important to rethink that, start with the principle of data parsimony rather than take whatever you can, because safe storage, prevention of misuse, etc. is always going to be a problem.
Blockchain, crypto, and digital currencies offer exciting potential that need to be approached cautiously.
Blockchain holds tremendous promise from providing more transparency and reducing costs for our end customer. It could also democratize wealth creation and ownership for those that are financially excluded. But cryptocurrencies come with real risks. A number of crypto assets have collapsed, wiping out millions of dollars of value. Governments are still trying to figure out how to regulate this nascent industry. This just highlights that we must tread carefully as we harness these new solutions to bring appropriate financial services and products to the unbanked.
The 2 big risks that I see over the long term, and we all need to be mindful of, is 1, CBDC is currency, and let us not forget that. The second issue is that everyone needs to situate CBDC, particularly their exploration of the CBDC, within their local context. Nonetheless, it is a very fruitful learning process. Be open to learning, be open to new possibilities as you explore CBDC, and most importantly, be human-centered in your approach to CBDC.
In this digital era, and with all these rapidly changing risks, we collectively need to turn our attention to ensuring that people are protected and that we put customers first.
It's been a challenge for our field, whether it's from impact investors or regulators, to find ways to engage and audit these tools and algorithms in ways that are helpful for them and yield responsible practices, but also respect private companies' intellectual property. And I think the harms are less visible to the consumer. If you think about a loan officer treating someone badly, you can see that. But if an algorithm is discriminatory, it can reach a much larger scale.
How can we go beyond what regulations and policies require us to do for consumer protection, and certainly make sure all of our products and services are affordable, safe, and of quality? But on top of that, what additional extra efforts could we make to not just establish, but to build and maintain trust with the customer that can afford empowerment? And that's where I see the promise of privacy by design.
But the good news is we see with surveys, with complaints data, we have new tools to measure how much fraud is occurring and, more importantly, who it's affected, whether it's more common in rural areas and amongst the younger population. And with sophisticated analysis of social media data, we can also use that resource to track in almost real time increases in fraud or new scams as they emerge. And I think that'll lead to better protection for consumers and better enforcement to track down fraudsters.
Digital finance consumer risks pose a threat to financial inclusion, which is an enabler of 7 of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. We must take urgent action to mitigate digital finance risks, especially for vulnerable consumers such as low-income women.